Thank you very much. It's an honor to be included in this event. I have studied corruption for 2 decades and written extensively on it. That's the most recent writing, which is written for a general audience. In my 7 minutes, I will make 3 points, but let me preface my remarks by reminding you what corruption is. It's the use or abuse of public office for personal or partisan gain. How do I? Okay. So my first point is that corruption is a culture. A culture is something that is sustained by mutual expectations. Bribe payers and bribe takers expect to be operating in a corrupt environment. A great illustration of this comes from research conducted with truckers on the highways of West Africa. I didn't do that research because this is one research project that would have been impossible for a female researcher to undertake. In this setting, truckers have to pay a bribe every time they encounter a checkpoint on the highway, and there are hundreds and hundreds of checkpoints. The researcher who rode with the truckers, that's why it had to be a guy, to study these interactions, found that the average time to get through the checkpoints was about 5 seconds. This means that the truckers knew that they had to pay a bribe, they had their bribe money set aside, and they knew how much to pay. If this weren't the case, they couldn't have breezed through those checkpoints. So if you want to eradicate that form of corruption, asking truckers simply not to pay would not have worked. Asking a single trucker not to pay would have been even worse, because that poor guy would simply have been stuck at the first checkpoint for the rest of his life. So stopping these corrupt interactions means that the men taking the bribes have to stop expecting to receive them. This is what is called a Big Bang approach. That is, you have to get large numbers of participants on both sides of the interaction to stop the exchange simultaneously. This is an implication of thinking about corruption as a culture, that to stop corruption, you have to change expectations, and you have to do so using a Big Bang approach. My second point follows directly from my first. Obviously, the men manning those checkpoints are not going to want to stop taking bribes. They are benefiting from the extra income that they receive. The bribes are supplementing their salaries. So let's assume through a combination of carrots and sticks that you devise new policies that actually tries to prevent these men at the checkpoints from extorting truck drivers. Let's say you raise their salaries to try to compensate for the lost bribes, and you install webcams at the checkpoints to monitor that they don't continue to take bribes. Even so, the people who are on the losing end are going to strategically reorient their behavior. If they can no longer take bribes when the webcams are operating, they're going to look for alternatives. Perhaps they'll sabotage the webcams and continue to demand bribes from the truck drivers. Or perhaps, and this is very likely, the webcams will fail when the electricity goes out, and then the guards will be able to take bribes knowing that no one can observe their behavior. So these kinds of evasive actions are extremely common, and they're called spillovers. Do spillovers mean that policies to reduce corruption are hopeless? Will people who stand to lose out when anti-corruption policies come into effect simply make up their losses in other ways, maybe even in ways that are more difficult to discover? Research shows that when corrupt officials have to reorient their behavior in response to anti-corruption policies, the overall aggregate impact is a reduction in corruption. This makes sense because the evasive action will result in less corruption. If that hadn't been the case, they would have been using that action in the first place. Think of it historically. Think of over long stretches of time. In countries that used to be very corrupt, including the United States, anti-corruption policies have gradually been effective despite the opportunities for strategic displacement. But spillovers need to be anticipated when designing anti-corruption policies in order to make those policies as effective as possible and reduce the spillovers. My final point has to do with identifying the opportunities for anti-corruption policies to be most effective. This figure shows the relationship between GDP per capita on the x-axis at the bottom and Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index. So you can see that GDP per capita is very closely related to corruption, and that corruption falls as GDP per capita rises. If we were to draw a line that statistically predicts corruption on the basis of GDP, this is what it would look like. In this figure, countries that are above the line have more corruption than GDP alone predicts. These are countries which have experienced substantial economic development, but where corruption hasn't fallen as much as expected. Perhaps it's even gotten worse. Those are the countries with the most pent-up demand for corruption and whose political leaders have the most opportunities to reduce corruption. For instance, in Latin America, with some of whose countries are highlighted in red, you can see that Mexico, Guatemala, and Colombia are all above the line, and Costa Rica, by contrast, is below the line. So don't waste anti-corruption initiatives on Costa Rica. They're already doing extremely well, given how wealthy they are. On the countries above the line, Mexico is the furthest off the line of those I've highlighted, and it is generally believed to have the most corruption relative to its level of economic development. In fact, in Mexico, there's huge popular appetite for anti-corruption initiatives, as reflected in the most recent election results. Anti-corruption activists should therefore take advantage of this by keeping Mexico in the global spotlight, providing resources to policymakers there, and encouraging public surveillance of anti-corruption initiatives in the country. As part of these efforts, it is especially important to watch for and guard against strategic reorientation by corrupt officials who will seek to evade the new anti-corruption efforts precisely in order to preserve the illegal incomes that they have been making from corruption. So you can see my work is mainly at the micro level, not the big macro level. I hope that it's informative for those of you who think at the systems level, and that these remarks have been helpful.